Okay, so I guess we can start. Hey, Armen, good to see you, brother.
Likewise, Albert. Let's have a great session.
Cool. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. Together with me, I have today our Chief Strategy Officer, Armen Kherlopian, who is a well-known scientist based out of New York. Happy Monday. So today, my Monday was happy as well. If you can see, my daughter didn't like the tattoos, and she put some stickers. So I had some fun time before the webinar, persuading her that she has to leave me alone so I can chat with the team. But nevertheless, so today we're going to cover the future trends of AI and security for this year, which look quite interesting, by the way, and it's very different from what we have been observing as an industry for the last 5 to 10 years at least. Armin, so today maybe you can present yourself.
We're delighted to do so, Albert, and always a pleasure to be in session. In terms of my own career, it's had three major chapters. One in academic science across Columbia, Cornell, Princeton University. Two as an executive of massive global corporations, and three with startups. So it is my distinct pleasure to be having been an investor, entrepreneur, accelerator co-founder, and to be standing with you, Albert, and the team today regarding a very important industry sector.
Excellent. And I'm Albert. I'm the CEO of the company. I have a mix of various backgrounds. I was in military, then I was an engineer for some of the Fortune 500 companies. Then I got into security consulting, did a lot of projects in various parts of the globe, very multinational, speak many languages, lived in many countries, and now leading Scylla outside of the United States. So today we are going to cover some of the key trends which are actual for 2026. Obviously, the key trend now is AI, right? And AI has been transitioning like throughout the years from standard machine learning towards deep learning, and now we all face the explosion of the vision language models, where basically you have a large model or a small model like Scylla has, and then you can talk to it, you can perform many tasks, you can do custom detections. And this is all very exciting, and I believe this is the future. But as I said before, we have to take it with a grain of salt because the VLMs are not a silver bullet. So they can cover many tasks, including industrial maintenance. They can be very, very good in forensic analysis. They can be very good in investigation processes and adding reasoning and the context to the alarms, plus automating the reporting for the security guards and the first responders. But still, deep learning computer vision is the key for long range detections and having a minimal, close to minimal zero false positive rate. And obviously, not missing detections. Like in case of weapon detection, I wouldn't trust a company using a vision language model or weapon detection product. So that still should be based on very, very accurate and long range object detection using computer vision and deep learning. We also see in the market a rapid consolidation. Armen, so as you are leading our investor relationships and also you are very active on the market with the acquisition strategies and also investment, maybe you can cover this part.
Yeah, delighted to do so. And one analogy we're seeing here is that, as Scylla, it represents advanced computer vision technology. Something is happening in the security space that we're seeing also having happened in the driverless car space, where first there's literally hundreds of companies that say we can build a driverless car. And whether that is a large incumbent, a ride sharing company, a technology company. And what's happened in the market is there's been massive consolidation because a failure of a driverless car is a high risk collision. And so there's only a handful of players that are viable. Here in security, you don't have as fantastical impact as a crashed car, but the stakes are arguably even higher. For example, in a mass shooting, there can be 2 to 4 minutes where the firearm is observable by cameras, but not auto detected. So here in Scylla, delighted to see that we are at the forefront of the viable companies making a meaningful difference, particularly when the market includes different types of players, from video management systems to integrators to customers, to large enterprises?
Thank you, Armen. So my observation on the market, and by speaking with many players, like including some strategic buyers, but also the startups, there is like a lot of consolidation happening on the market, right? So we have seen big wave of funds being raised in 2020, 2021, and many companies raised a lot of money, including Scylla. In 2022, there was a funding freeze. So a lot of smaller companies that couldn't become break-even or profitable, they shut down. They have been acquired by larger players for not big amounts. There are some cases like very famous facial recognition companies which raised almost $800 million from companies like SoftBank. They have been acquired for a very small amount of money and completely out of safety and security industry, like joining a parking automation company. So, and we see now like a lot of smaller startups or mid-sized startups signing strategic agreements with the world's largest system integrators, right? And then trying to play together, which is, I believe, is the right way to go. And we also see some of successful companies becoming break-even and profitable, and become like continuing to grow independently, and specifically understanding the customers, having a very good and niche product market fit, right? There is also a lot of shift in the global regulations. So not a secret that I spend a lot of time in Europe as well, next to United States, from my previous background in Germany and in Poland. So Europe specifically is tightening the screws, like and increasing the regulation across the place. So banning technologies like facial recognition, with the latest AI Act, naming it a high-risk environment, right? We see some positive movement that Chinese companies essentially are getting scrutinized more and more, both in Europe, and then historically they have been under pressure in the United States, right? For many of the practices, including cybersecurity, cloud compliance, NDAA, and many others, right? Like both geopolitical restrictions, but also related to cyber. So specifically, we also see some of the latest regulations happening in the United Kingdom related to AI technology, and also some states and cities in the United States are adopting new privacy regulations, such as you have to do face blurring when you do detection, or you have to have specific type of certifications, etc., etc. Anything to add here, Armen?
Yeah, thank you, Albert. Yeah, this tie-in with regulations and cyber is quite intriguing. What we're seeing right now is that physical security is having a moment like that of cybersecurity from a decade ago, in that buyers, protocols, and policies at large corporations also involve not only the CSO, the Chief Security Officer, but the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. Examples that we see well out in the market, for example, tailgating can involve a physical card or a stolen card, and that matched with biometric data in certain geographies. And of course, being powered by computer vision is important because digital attacks can have a physical component.
Thank you, Armen. With this point, like there's a lot of like we as an AI company are spending a lot of time on the compliance and regulations, and because we operate globally, we have customers in the United States, we have Canada, which is now taking a completely different path on the regulations, right, and decoupling itself from more or less like US compliant technologies. We have Europe, which is, I would say, the most regulated market on the planet. We are also operating in the Middle East, in Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Israel, and many other countries. And each of them are trying to create a digital sovereign data centers and infrastructures with their own regulations. Like, and every single country is taking a lot of effort in protecting their own customers' data and their citizens' data. And specifically, there is a lot of certifications that you need to have in order to operate in the Middle Eastern countries which are now leading the digital disruption in the region, right? We see lots of regulations now happening in Singapore. South Korea has been traditionally very strong on regulating technologies. Japan, which has been mostly, I would say, lagging behind the rest of the Asian countries on an AI technology, but now they are taking proactive steps, how to create a digital sovereign data centers, infrastructure, regulate their own cloud providers, etc., etc. So there's a lot of movement based on geopolitics happening in different parts of the globe. And you as a company or as a system integrator have to be careful with those. And you have to learn those, right? Because those are very critical to be able to implement solutions like Scylla for your customers in those regions. What we see that the good news for our industry and also for the companies like Scylla, that the market is growing drastically, right? So traditionally, I would say if we go back 12 or 14 years ago, there were like maybe 5 or 6 players, independent players doing motion detection, pixel-based analysis. Some of them started doing anomaly detection, which didn't end well because that technology is inherently inferior, like to deep learning or vision language models. But nevertheless, like the rapid growth started, I would say, from 2023, 2024, when the end buyer suddenly understood that AI is actually delivering results. Yes, it's not fully autonomous, but the technologies that used to be on the market 10 or 12 years ago is a matter of past. And now companies finally started to learn how to deliver properly working AI technology, how to make it scalable, and how to address business cases in the verticals, right? So there's a huge momentum now for AI companies in the security space, and not only on the AI and the video surveillance, right? So you have report automation, you have agents like which are trying to escalate the situation based on different and various data coming from various sensors, right? Access control systems, video analytics from Scylla, intrusion sensors, radars, etc., right? And North America, as always, obviously, is the leader in the growth for these technologies, both from the safety and security perspective, but also from the industrial maintenance perspective. There's a lot of investment going on in this space, and like a lot of Fortune 500 companies started to pay attention on this because of the safety and security of the executives, because there is a lot of shortage of the manpower in the traditional security industry, because of the wages going up, and a very banal reason, just because young people don't want to work as security guards anymore. So these companies have to somehow replace the man hour that they're billing to the end customers with the smart technology, right? Cloud deployment is growing rapidly, but we also see a shift from that because of the cyber issues and the policies, and because of the cloud costs taking place. So many like you have now 2 types of companies which are saying we are going full cloud, and the companies are saying now we want just on-premise, we have a zero tolerance policy, cyber is a big issue for us, we want a completely air-gapped environment, we don't want to have any dependency on third-party or open source models, we don't want to use any public AI model providers, so we need like a very niche and proprietary model to be working on-prem within our air-gapped environment and empower our local GSOC people. Armen, anything to add here from your enterprise background?
Yeah, delighted to do so. Yeah, this cloud trend is an intriguing one. If we go back to a previous wave, for example, mobile, there was an adoption across different industries. And there's whole categories of software that were refashioned for the cloud across different industry areas. And here, what we're seeing with robotics, what we're seeing in security, what we're seeing in autonomous vehicles, is that there's almost like a wave push back, exactly for the reasons you highlighted, Albert, and in particular on performance. You know, the idea that a car can be fully remotely driven is given way to this idea that all the primary compute should be done local. And in mission critical areas such as gun detection, anomalous behavior detection, intrusion detection, and the fantastic suite of capabilities we have at Scylla, that local compute is really important. So we'll see how the market stabilizes, but it's really great we're able to play in both segments.
And there's a tendency that edge is the future, where some of the heavy lifting is done on edge, whether that's on edge device or on the camera level. And cloud is more for being an alarm management hub, for orchestration, for remote management, control, data aggregation, enabling visual language models to perform smart search, to make sense of the data, to enable automated reporting and transferring the data to the first responders. Maybe Armen, like you can also cover the state of the infrastructure where fiber is still a big issue, specifically in the West, right, which is Europe and the United States. And many countries are still using like an antiquated network and architecture and infrastructures. And having a cloud-only solution is pretty much just exposing yourself and your enterprise to a threat, right? Because if you will detect a weapon just in the cloud by streaming an RTSP to the cloud or being dependent on a third-party central station or to confirm the alarms, you are potentially looking at 20 to 30 seconds or even like a minute latency detecting things like weapons, fights, knives, or even potential terrorists on a watch list, right? Whereas having like a complete on-prem or edge infrastructure, we are talking about sub 100 millisecond response times, which is a make it or break it in this kind of environments.
Yeah, it's very clear. You know, I've been in a half dozen cities over the last 2 weeks, and this point is really something that's hidden in plain sight. You know, if you're on a good network close to a cell tower or in a corporate environment, yeah, you could have sub 10 millisecond pings. But the reality is most public spaces, best case, you're still at 250 millisecond pings for like a basic message. We're not even talking about an HD video feed, let alone something approaching 4K. So exactly, we're hitting this point where the cameras are producing more data and they're straining the existing networks and data pipes. So again, this points to that certainly in the near and midterm, having compute and more broadly perception capability as infrastructure being done locally is critical and, you know, of course, technically very hard to do.
Yes, what's also very important and what we see in our like state and also enterprise deployments is that the companies which are trying to connect to the camera directly by using port forwarding or the RTSP stream, there's a lot of like overload on the camera network, right? So and these companies are promising skies to the end customer without explaining the what's happening like below that, right? Like, so if you connect to every camera and open up an additional stream and open a sub profile, at the end you're going to kill the network. So the camera is going to choke. Those cameras are not created to have 3 or 4 sub profiles connected to the remote cloud location by using port forwarding. So going edge or using a VMS or a command center platform in between, where that VMS will centralize all the streams into a one streaming protocol and then connect to the cloud, that's kind of the way it should be done. Because what we see on the market, there's a lot of heresy where an AI company will come and they will promise you, you just port forward it to the, I mean, it's okay to do it for the POC, don't get me wrong, for 4 cameras, just to prove that your, let's say, fight detection or gun detection or facial recognition works. But if you are deploying an enterprise-wide or school-wide architecture for 1,000 cameras and you just port forward everything, or you just do the RTSP stream like through every single camera and open a sub profile from an Axis, Hanva, or even like an older Panasonic camera, those cameras are going to choke, right? So the proper way like to do this is you need to have like a VMS system in place, or at least an edge device with AI and VR capability, where it will synchronize all the streams into one platform, and the AI will work pretty much based on that. There's a lot of issues also that the companies are not using proprietary streaming mechanisms. So they'll take like an OpenCV or a FFmpeg, or they'll take like a very raw version of the deep stream without customizing it, and we'll just like dump it into the local machine or to the cloud, and we'll read the stream from there. Now, this is coming also with a lot of like overload on your network. It will introduce latency. Once the camera goes offline or the bitrate is not correctly set or the frame rate, those open source streamers are not telling you anything at all. So the proper way to do this, you need to select companies that have proprietary video streaming protocols, that know how to handle the health checks, that know when the camera goes offline, that when the frame rate changes, bitrate changes, because that always going to introduce essentially potential misses of physical fights, weapons, or knives. And that is going to be, besides loss of life, a huge liability on your enterprise, if that makes sense. So, Armen, maybe this is your part because you are taking care of all the investment relationships, like both for Scylla, but also your own fund. Maybe you can tell more because you're a fund manager, actually, right? You can tell more about the increase of the M&A transactions, VC investment practices overall now at this stage, what makes sense in selecting the potential partner, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, most certainly. The interest in security and defense as a broader tailwind is coming in part by uh, the need to balance safety around the world, and also technology being rapidly matured. There's a set of companies from SpaceX in space technology, Anduril in defense, Palantir in aspects of intelligence, and Scylla in security, following this lineage in terms of using modern development capabilities to go after industry segments that typically follow things such as waterfall development. So in terms of the rapid iteration, it's quite exciting. There's been more interest in the investment community in security and defense. There has been more interest in particular having technology work with hardware as well. And in particular, it's clear that companies that are able to grow in such industry subsegments within security and defense can have meaningful data advantages, such as Scylla. So it's absolutely fascinating and exciting industry segment, and very much having a moment like cybersecurity did over a decade ago.
Thank you, Armen. So let's get back to the VLMs, right? Because this is what we believe and what the market believes is the future. So let me kind of divide this into two buckets, right? Let's say you have a customer and the customer needs some kind of like very specialized long-range intrusion detection where you don't have like 4K cameras installed, you don't have a good camera coverage, right? And you have large perimeters and you have high value environments like luxury car dealerships, the residential areas for wealthy individuals, you have warehouses, logistic companies, you have seaports, airports, military bases, nuclear stations, critical infrastructure, etc. So trusting vision language models with that is not a good idea at this point, because deep learning is so much lightweight and so much accurate, and it's a very established field now. You can have potentially close to zero false positives if you train your models well, right? And also install it in a correct location and follow the guidelines, right? Or same as the weapon detection. So we see, as I said, like a lot of heresy on the market where people are marketing weapon detection as part of the vision language model. I mean, yeah, if it's a closed range environment and you are testing it for the POC or doing a customer demo, it may work. But just from the engineering perspective, like any kind of language model, whether it's a vision language model or a large language model, they are hallucinating, and they're hallucinating a lot, right? Because they don't understand the context. It really depends how you frame the prompt. And those are such like huge models that improving the false positive or false negative rate like will require a lot of iterations on training and retraining. And how do you find that much customer data, like for gun detection, let's say, right? So this is not the proper way how to use the VLMs, where VLMs, even small VLMs like Scylla's, which is 4 billion parameters and one of the smallest models on the market, and the lightweight, we are not recommending our customers to use it for things like fight detection or gun detection or intrusion detection, right? So where VLMs are very powerful, if you have stable environments where you need to do industrial inspection, or you are doing secondary verification of existing alarms from deep learning platforms, right? And you need to add context reasoning. You need to add escalation levels where VLMs excel. They can read the SOPs, and then they can analyze the existing alarms based on the SOP and decide whether that requires supervisory agent attention, or it needs escalation, or it needs just to be disregarded because that was a fight, but at the end, 2 kids were involved, right? And it was a horseplay. For deep learning, that's a fight. For vision language model, there is more context, right? So also vision language models are very powerful in forensic search and doing investigation analysis, filtering out reports, filtering out double verification of the alarms, doing industrial. One of the key benefits of the VLMs that if you have a controlled environment, let's say a fixed camera watching the oil pipeline or the valve, it can understand the oil leaks, and it can understand the water leaks. It can understand the any kind of defects during production or manufacturing. It can count objects. It can very accurately detect characters, right, and then interpret them. But again, you will never use vision language model as a license plate tool. Like some companies do this. I don't think it's very smart. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they don't tell the truth to the customer. But like, why should you use a vision language model if you have an OCR model? And that's a very established field, right? Or why would you use VLMs to detect faces if you have face matching algorithms, right? Like whether you use open source, you created your own. So again, VLMs are very useful. They are definitely the future. Where VLMs are now, they are very good in search, in double verification, industrial maintenance, OCR reading, escalation, reading SOPs, and many more. But this is definitely not a replacement for deep learning-based object detection or motion sequence analysis like fight detection at this point of time. Anything to add here, Armen?
Yeah, I'm really glad you highlighted this point, Albert, and it really speaks to this idea of being fit for purpose. Namely, it's one thing to have computer vision used for convenience. Is there a package on the door that someone walked by my street? But when we're talking about mission critical areas, having the balance of VLMs as well as different neural network capabilities is really important to have exactly that very, very low false positives. Albert would love to hear, and the audience would love to hear the latest stats in terms of Scylla's capability in terms of the false negatives.
Thanks, Armen. So the way we position ourselves on the market, and it's just not just marketing. So we provide references, we have the white papers, we have third-party benchmarks like in CodeLab, we have industry publications, we have the validation from many federal and non-federal customers, right? So we normally position ourselves that we have a 96% plus accuracy rate, meaning a very low amount of false negatives, like close to zero, and 1 false positive per 10 cameras per day. So let's assume you have an organization where you have 7,000 cameras. So with Scylla, you will get 70 to 80 false positives per day, which are very manageable with the 1 GSOC operator. Whereas like any single other company on the market or a solution on the market, you will receive times more false positives. And moreover, you will miss alarms, right? Because most of these solutions are based on YOLO or some well-known architectures, which are not designed for CCTV analysis. So they're very good at image processing. They're very good in various tasks, right? Like as computer vision. But CCTV requires something very unique, fit for purpose, and specifically tailored towards use cases which are mission critical, where you should never miss an object, right, or an activity, and you should have as few false positives as possible, because operators don't have enough time, they don't have enough attention, and they're just not good at this, right? So the operators are not created to watch false alarms. They should evaluate the situation, and they should escalate the situation to the first responders or the security teams on site. Let's get back to the regulation, right? Because when you implement solutions like this, you have to take into account regulation. Anything which is safety, security related, or moreover surveillance related, has public opinions about it, has people supporting it, people opposing it, right? And obviously that results as regulation. And Fortunately or unfortunately, the most of the regulations on this planet are happening in the European Union. And one of the latest regulations, essentially, I mean, it's not late, it's not very new. It's like in the works for the like 4 or 5 years already, but it was adopted last year, right? And that's the EU AI Act, which specifically ranks AI technologies according to the risk profile. So, and obviously the highest risk profile is facial recognition, right? So they are considering it as a high risk. So whenever you consider facial recognition technology for your customer outside of the UK, because that's not Europe anymore, you have to take into account that any customer which is not law enforcement, which has nothing to do with the anti-terrorism, which has nothing to do with the public spaces protection from the law enforcement perspective, is considered as a high risk when they implement a facial recognition. So it's a big no in Europe for any commercial enterprise, as long as it's not approved by specific agencies in each and every country in Europe, and they are not serving the role of the law enforcement, right? And there are other countries which are doing it state by state or in a smaller scale, like India, for example. They recently banned everything Chinese, right? China, it's the country with the most of the regulations related to surveillance. It's just not in the news, right? The UK, they have their own facial recognition technology certifications and regulations, right? And multiple US states are also enacting their own biometric restrictions. So the evolving role of the VMS platforms, this is one of the key growth areas in our industry because, as I said, like this, traditionally there have been a lot of customers which were just like living with their existing MVRs or DVR systems, right? And we see a lot of customers now either replacing their antiquated systems or improving their existing infrastructures by implementing the critical infrastructure layer, which is the video management system, or for some customers and verticals, command and control platforms. And obviously, it's not a secret that the dominant enterprise players in this market are Genetec, Milestone, and JCI with their own Exact Vision and American Dynamics, right? The enterprise VMS systems are growing and they're increasing their market presence, but they also face critical challenges because customers are requiring not only consolidation of the infrastructure, but also enabling AI on it. And those platforms which are open to third-party companies like Scylla, or which are working on their own AI solutions, which are investing a lot of money and time into improving and enabling automation for the operators, those are the ones which will be the winners on the market, right? Whether they are on-prem or cloud, because each of them have their like distinct customers. The cloud companies are targeting more mid-market customers and enterprise, and on-prem VMS systems are targeting enterprise and governments, right? And the key is how do these players work and partner with third parties or develop their own solutions to address the customer needs better? Because the companies which will not be able to innovate on time and not implement AI for their customers, they'll be left out of the market at some point of time. Where Scylla comes into place, so we partner with more than 30 companies at this point, right? Both on the VMS, but also camera level. We are also quite well integrated with the access control systems, but also drones. Like as an example, we do have deployments with Skydio on Nightingale drones in the United States and Europe, where we do industrial inspection, military-based protection, and many more objectives, right? So we do partner with VMS systems. Like we are a partner with Milestone, Genetec. We are a strategic partner with Johnson Controls and their Exact platform, and many others. And by enabling Scylla as a layer, as a plugin on top of your system, you get automation, you get industrial maintenance, you get safety security practices, but also business intelligence and health checks, right, which are coming embedded with the platform, right? Anything to add here, Armen?
Yeah, I would say, what used to be a piece of hardware that's an afterthought in terms of, supporting video streams has much more demands. And I've been very proud to see the ruggedness of and versatility of the deployment types that Scylla can support, whether on camera, near edge, on-prem, cloud. And this has really shifted the dynamic in the security sector in that instead of doing a wholesale hardware refresh of cameras, the existing infrastructure has more to give. And that's possible with having advances in what a VMS can be. And Scylla is helping to drive that industry trend, which has a really great benefit for customers.
We see two key emerging segments, right, on the market. One of them is the gun detection. So traditionally, this technology has had a lot of skeptics. A lot of customers did not believe in this. But the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, like this technology really picked up its scale. So we see lots of adoption now, especially in the United States, for schools, healthcare facilities, enterprises, government facilities, federal agencies, military bases, etc., right? And a lot of states also have passed their laws funding this weapon detection technology. Unfortunately, most of these funds were biased towards one or two players, but that's a different topic. I believe you can Google and search for that. But we see lots of adoption in the enterprises where the customers are looking for a very accurate, long range, very versatile, and also air-gapped technology like Scylla weapon detection, and they're rapidly adapting it. But having just weapon detection is not enough, right? So if a vendor tells you just install AI weapon detection and then we'll solve all your issues, most probably it's just sales process, right? So because we believe in a layered mechanism where you have the metal detectors or weapon detection at the entrances, you have cameras watching for people with weapons on the parking lots, you have specific protections like in schools or in facilities for secure doors and locks. You have access control integration for immediate lockdown, and you have vision language models providing the reasoning and escalation level on top of the existing weapon detection alarms, right? So you need to have this multitude of technologies inside your organization. And what I like about Chris Grolek and his team, which he's the leading active shooter prevention expert in the United States, you need to train your people, right? Because you can have the best technologies in your facility, but that's not enough because you need to understand the SOPs or how the superintendents work in schools, let's say, or how it's organized in the healthcare facility versus the sports arena, right? How to initiate the lockdown protocols, like who is responsible for the escalation to the first responders, how is the active shooter response going to happen, how do you navigate the first responders across your facility, providing them like complete technology, including the mapping, etc. So you really need to start with the foundation, which is the training and designing the protective mechanism, and then going into implementing not a single technology, but multitude of technologies, right? And we see also lots of growth now happening in various sectors, but also retail, right? Like which is now facing a lot of issues with the organized crime, where pretty much you have groups of people entering the shops and then taking whatever they can, and no technology can stop that, right? But we can help with investigation processes and identifying the leaders of the organized crime who are normally hiring essentially underage kids to do the job for them, right? Anything to add here, Armen?
Yeah, I want to definitely double click on this really important point you highlighted, Albert, regarding multiple technologies. As an example, in mass shooting scenarios, often there's several minutes where the firearm is literally visible from a camera or a bystander. And so this idea that something like auditory gunshot detection is sufficient speaks to how the security industry is transforming from being reactive to proactive. And Albert, per your tour de force military security experience, you know very well that de-escalation and proactiveness are really paramount. So we're quite proud to support security professionals with this advanced technology.
Thank you, Armen. That's it. So thank you for your attention. Any questions that we have here in the chat? Let me quickly check. Armen, before we read the questions, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I would
Bring
most
parallels from
certainly.
your government experience and also enterprise experience.
Yeah. One thing, particularly with the investment work we do at Covenant, which includes deploying American sovereign capital, we track key trends. So, earlier we were touching on, what we see in the market, as appointed by Elon Musk, Gwynne Shotwell at the helm of SpaceX, help with a key innovation for society, namely having reusable rockets, which fundamentally transformed access to space with implications around the upcoming moon base to that of commercial work in near Earth orbit. As we've seen what Palantir and Alex Karpin team have advanced the type of data that can be brought to bear for intelligence. There's Palmer Luckey at Anduril, who have transformed defense tech in terms of renewal cycle, development cycle. There's Dino at Saronic for the Navy. There's Jake at Gecko Robotics in terms of proactive infrastructure. And Albert, it is an absolute pleasure, you at the helm here at Scylla and with our whole team doing a meaningful transformation in security, namely helping security being instead of reactive to proactive, that working with our customers, our partners, we can all make something like mass shootings only something that children read about in school books. So an absolute pleasure to be a co-panelist here today.
Thank you, Armen. So for me, it's very important because it's my company, right? So it's very important that we come to the market as very pragmatic leaders. So obviously we have to sell, right? Because we have to make money and feed our children and then also the team members. But we also don't want to overpromise in this market. And having what helps me and my team that we all have engineering background, we try to educate the customers, right? So what is possible and what is not possible, right? And that is helping us a lot because a lot of stuff which is being sold on the market is kind of not true, right? So you have to be very careful as system integrators or people implementing the solutions, understanding what is real and what is not, what the company can do and what the company cannot do. Moreover, what is technology you to do, what is not allowing you to do. Not everything which is new and shiny is feasible to implement or will work in the field. And also, skepticism is never an answer, right? Because the technology is developing, it's getting better, and we see like a day and night difference between the technologies that are existing on the market now versus there were 10 years ago, right? And we're not delivering to what they promised. So do your research, like educate yourself, work with the companies that try to educate yourself as well. And obviously every technology is a fit, like purpose fit. So you cannot just implement one technology that will cover all the needs of the customers, and different verticals have different customers. The sizes of the customers are different as well. So every company is good at one thing or two things or three things or a vertical or maybe a customer size, but they can be bad for a small customer or residential area. So that's very important to understand. And that's where we come into play also. We haven't established, so the question, how do we support the system integrators? We haven't established channel partner program. And if you guys are interested to becoming our partners, please send us an email or leave your email here, and we'll make sure that we connect with you and we onboard you and we certify you so you can resell Scale or implement for your customers. We have a question. So what Scale models typically go together? We have two models. You can buy a la carte, meaning it's a feature per camera, or you can buy a bundle, meaning you can buy complete Scala suite per camera and implement it as long as your compute allows, right? Or your cloud deployment allows to do that. Okay, so I guess we are done. So thank you everyone for your attention. Thanks, Armen, for joining me. And we'll make sure to distribute the recording of this to all participants and everybody who signed up.